Everyone, I'd like to call this meeting of the Citizens Advisory Board to order. I'm Rob Johnson, Vice Chairperson of the CAB. Secretary Greenlee, would you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Robert Castaneda,
Present.
Peter Henderson,
Present.
Robert Johnson,
Present.
Ryan McCray,
Here.
Caroline Pavlicek, present. Tracy Powell,
Here.
Tanya Raby is absent. Sonia Del Real,
Here.
Kirby, Scott Vanderweel,
Here.
Daniel Stanley, Emmanuel Garcia, student member, Ryan Parnell, student member absent, and Aiden Keith, student member is absent. Aiden actually has let us know in advance he would not be attending, as did Ryan Parnell.
Great.
You do have a quorum?
We've been advised that one of our members, Danielle Stanley, is not able to attend the meeting due to a work commitment. May I have a motion to allow Danielle Stanley to attend the meeting remotely?
So moved.
It's been moved by Caroline Pavlovic and seconded by Peter Henderson that Daniel Stanley be allowed to attend the meeting remotely. We'll take a roll call vote. Robert Castaneda.
Aye.
Sonia Del Real. Peter Henderson.
Aye.
Robert Johnson.
Aye.
Ryan McCray.
Aye.
Caroline Pavlicek.
Aye.
Tracy Powell.
Aye.
Scott Vanderweel.
Aye.
The motion passes. We can admit Danielle into the meeting. Vita, is she in? Yeah. Can't hear either. Okay.
All right. Next item on the agenda is the public comment. Georgette, are there any requests for public comment?
There have been no requests made for public comments.
Next item are the approval of the minutes. The minutes from this CAB held on December 6th, 2024 were distributed to the members prior to this meeting for review. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? So moved.
I didn't hear a second.
Tracy seconded.
Oh, it's been moved by Peter Henderson, seconded by Tracy Powell, that the minutes from December 6th, 2024 be approved as submitted. We'll take a roll call vote. Robert Castaneda.
Aye.
Sonia Del Real.
Aye.
Peter Henderson.
Aye.
Rob Johnson.
Aye.
Ryan McCray.
Aye.
Caroline Pavlicek.
Aye.
Tracy Powell. Scott Vanderweel.
Yes. Aye. All
The motion passes.
right, thank you. Next item is a working session today for the board. Security, basically security issues, 2025 issues, updates, potential solutions. I think we had a very spirited discussion and last month, just by a hair, last month about the priorities as we enter our final, not quite year. There was one of the items of consensus we did reach that one of our most effective tools are our reports to the board. And perhaps by increasing the effectiveness of these reports, we come to the board with more structured, pointed guidance on certain areas we would like to see improvements or issues we'd like to raise, suggestions that reflect on our respective constituencies. I know that security was one of the most pressing issues. I think it's somewhat timely. It seemed to be a issue of great import at the board level as well. So I think it's a good way to start out the year. We have it broken down into different subcategories. I'll take my privilege as the initial or as the stand-in chair to start, but for the subsection for bus riders, I'll honestly say I don't have a lot of feedback from our constituency. A lot of the security focus from the business community, especially spatially and CBD and extended CBD, it tends to be there are issues regarding buses, but it's not security focused. Most of ours be rail. I'm happy to open up for conversation. The rest of the board.
Are there other constituencies that you represent or that you are aware of that have specific security issues for buses and or strategies and solutions?
I've talked to every week I go to a senior center. And I've talked with a number of them about their issues. Generally speaking, their largest single issue is feeling insecure, but not necessarily having experienced anything that is truly violent in nature. The second one for them is issues regarding ease of getting to the bus stops and the buses being on time and that sort of thing. But every one of them that I spoke with will have explained to me that they have felt insecure. But when you query further, they have not experienced any particular, I don't know, advancements, attacks, interactions that are inappropriate. So and again, that's focused pretty much on the north side because that's where I live.
Thank you.
One thing I would say about buses is that I've talked to, and I've had this experience myself. I've talked to a couple of other folks who have disabilities, and a problem that often comes up is harassment for priority seating, especially if it appears that if you don't have a visible disability. People kind of question, like, do you belong in the priority seat area? I know for me, like I never felt uncomfortable using priority seats. Some of you might remember I injured my foot last year and I never felt uncomfortable using the priority seats then, but now, like, if I'm like in pain and need to sit down, like if somebody just looks at me, like I don't look like I have a disability. And so sometimes I've had people questioning, like, do you belong here? Like, why do you, like, why are you look like just a healthy young person. Like, why can you get up and like, no, I'm in pain. I'm trying to get where I need to go. And it's more difficult. I even had one instance in October where I was riding the bus and there was an individual who kept trying to talk to me and then eventually wound up screaming a bunch of slurs at me. And the bus driver didn't intervene or do anything. This person kept like, I don't like, this person kept calling me a bunch of like sexist language. And then was like insinuating that I was like I don't know, like just all sorts of sexist language and insinuating that I got called that wasn't the word she used, but generally this person was like harassing me for like just who I was presenting as at the time and using some language that was not appropriate. And the bus drivers, I think a lot of the time don't feel comfortable intervening or don't feel safe intervening, or if there was a way that if drivers could, discreetly call a supervisor to intervene if they don't feel safe doing things on their own, an operator and supervisor could work together to de-escalate situations like that.
Go ahead.
I have been on a bus where the bus driver has pulled the bus over and had the police come. And the offending passengers had already left. But I've experienced occasionally that it was last summer the time I had it happen to me.
So I know we had CTA security leadership come and present to the board. I think both of your accounts, they raise interesting questions, and it may be I just forgot or I missed this part, but I personally am not aware of protocols for intervention on buses. We talked a lot about rail. I remember that was a big point of discussion, and the types of districts and the types of tiers of security and what authority they have. I don't recall as much of a discussion on buses, but
Yeah, from what I recall from the meeting, they have police cars who drive around, and sometimes they'll follow the buses. But the police officers usually don't ride the bus, is what I remember from that meeting.
Yeah.
So, and again, I think the most troubling thing I remember from that meeting was the fact that they kept saying that security from the police department is available with this capacity. They kept saying that, and one thing that still does not sit well with me, especially when we're talking about security, is how do we? I think that it's a staggering amount of money. It was like, I want to say 60 million off the top of my head, but how do we spend 60 million in security and we don't know if we get it or not? That would be the biggest thing for me when it comes to safety and security.
are you referring to the intergovernmental agreement?
Yeah, because CTA pays Chicago Police Department, and the response that we kept hearing was when they have resources available, then they're provided to the CTA. And so I think to spend that kind of money on security resources and not be guaranteed something is that doesn't seem like the best use of dollars for public safety.
So we do have our Director of Security on Zoom with us. Kevin, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Okay. Kevin, can you please speak up?
Can you hear me? Is that working?
Were you able to hear Robert Castaneda's concern about the amount budgeted, I think specifically for CPD? And can you provide some insight regarding kind of how that coverage for CPD works?
So the intergovernmental agreement applies for,
We can't, none of us can hear him.
can you hear me?
I think it's our equipment, though. We need to.
Right, I'm telling Vita that.
Let me know.
Okay, we will.
Ask him to turn his audio up. There's nothing.
Vita asked, can you please turn up your audio on your mic, I guess, in your laptop?
Let's see. Give me 1 second.
Try again. We turned up the volume on the monitor here.
Kevin, can you say something? We turned up the volume on the monitor.
Is that working at all?
I'm sorry.
Uh,
Is it a standalone speaker on the sound out of, or is it coming out of the monitor?
May I ask what office Kevin is in?
Safety and security.
I mean, his physical location.
I don't know.
I'm up on the 5th floor right now.
And that is fine.
Now working?
All right. Are we at full volume?
It's not working?
Working. Okay.
it's working, the volume is just low.
How about now?
All right, try now.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
A little better.
It's a little better.
It's a little better. All right. All right, I'll try to speak up. So the police department, the IGA allows for us we hire back police officers on their day off to work the system. Majority of the officers work rail, but we do have officers on about 4 routes that were requested primarily for crime conditions and bus operators requesting them. The current daily allotment of officers is about 90 to 100. That's spread over 3 shifts. They work all 3 shifts, as they said. They work in uniform. They report to the public transportation section for assignment. and they're spread out all over the city, but usually the top spots and routes and locations are based on crime data. Homeland security issues are the top two indicators. The other issues are they work primarily stations, but they are riding trains now again. They're riding trains during the day and afternoon at the start of their shifts, about 2 hours on the red and the blue line. The bus routes are primarily on the west and south sides. They don't just follow the bus. The officer gets on the bus and rides. And then they jump off and get on another bus. We also have private security on, I believe, 4 routes on these west and south sides again that ride during the afternoon hours.
I have a follow-up question, based on, other sister agencies and when off-duty officers are working for them, even if they're in uniform. When off-duty officers are working for CTA, do they have the full ability to exercise their police powers?
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do. Okay, thank you. And what is the amount that's allocated to CPD from CTA every year?
I don't have it in front of me. I believe it's about 60 million. We're looking at increasing it.
And I remember when we had the security briefing, it was mentioned that that those you had mentioned about hiring off-duty police officers, right? And the 60 million that's allocated for like it's somebody's shift to work, right? Like they don't have the option, they're coming to work and they're being allocated CTA. Is that the 60 million? Or is, like how much goes to CTA for scheduled officers? And then how much is going in towards the time and a half? And I'm asking that because it doesn't seem like a good deal. I know at the security briefing, they were excited that they were able to pay officers time and a half to come work on their day off. It just doesn't seem like the most efficient use of resources to be paying officers time and a half. And so I guess what I'm asking is like, out of that 60 million, how much of that is regular time where it's officers paying their regular time to work on CTA compared to how much is being used for paying time and a half?
None of it. All
So
the mass transit unit has personnel that are assigned to work CTA 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The
So that's the
off-duty
60 million.
officers supplement that and work their days off for the police department, similar to what police districts use to supplement manpower shortages.
Kevin, to clarify though, does CTA pay for the mass transit unit salaries for officers?
Not really, no. Very little of it. We do some pass-through funding that comes from the federal government that is anti-terrorism based. But that does not affect our budget, and it doesn't come from our budget.
Can you provide the dollar amount that CTA allocates with its IGA with respect to the voluntary?
It's about 60 million right now.
I thought I remember from our last briefing, maybe some clarification. There was like 60 million in the bucket for like regular policing, kind of what he's saying right now. But I remember there being an additional amount that part of that money was being used to hire private security firms. Other monies were being used to hire off-duty police officers. Am I misunderstanding that?
Yeah, there's no other money being hiring off-duty police officers. The other money are competitively bidded contracts that are awarded currently to 3 different private security companies plus subcontractors, and they work for the CTA, and we deploy out. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I can pull it up, but it's probably about 400 private security officers per day spread out over 24/7.
Got it. And then you could just add a little bit of clarity on the statements from when we had our security briefing around the comments regarding when CPD has capacity. I was led to believe from that briefing that we don't always have the same amount of coverage, kind of like in neighborhoods, right? You know, if you have so many people who are supposed to be at the district and people don't show up to work, et cetera. How does that work?
That happens on occasion, but the city's cutting back on their overtime. So we're getting full rosters for probably the last quarter of the year. The one time that we didn't have any was during the convention, because Chicago police canceled all days off for their officers, and the officers had to work for the city. That can happen in emergencies or specific situations. They aren't too often. The officers, and just as a side note, many of the officers that had their days off canceled to work for the city during the convention were on the CTA. So.
Thank you.
Regarding the contracted security, when we held our last meeting about security, we were told, after voicing concerns that no one sees these private contractors doing anything productive, we were told that CTA was in communication with the contracting agencies and that the contracting agencies were actively letting go the visibly ineffective contracted security. Do you have numbers for turnover within those agencies? Like, how many people have they let go due to being visibly unhelpful?
I can tell you Intercon had the most. It's in excess of, I think, 40 or 50. Monterey wasn't too bad. Action K-9 only had 12. Action K-9 is probably the best performer. We do, let me pull up, I'm going to share my screen for a second, okay? Let me see. Let me know when you can see that.
Yep. The screen
Okay.
sharing. Yep.
This is primarily, hold on, I have to move some stuff around so I can see it. Okay. This is primarily in reference to the K-9 contract, but you asked are they effective? So yes, they are effective. And this is specific to Action K-9 posts that they're regularly at. We looked at complaints coming to this. These aren't police stats. These are internal stats that go into our control center from employee and customer complaints. From 2019 through 2024, you can see down about 6.8% on the red line, 9.3% on the blue, and 9.7% on the green. Now, Action K-9 has not worked the blue too much until the last probably 6 months of last year. Here's some of their busiest stations. These are some challenging locations. And you can see, especially like at Howard, it's down 39%, but it's down across the board. We track the metrics. So this is total crime on the red line per 1,000 riders per CTA stats. You can see it kind of bouncing around from 2019 going down. This is the crimes per 1,000 riders, and the red line represents when Action K-9 was started getting deployed in large numbers on the red line. And you can see it's been a downward trend here. Here you can see what engagements Action K-9 undertakes on the most types of engagement they engage in. I'm getting redundant. So the violation of 1 seat rule, loitering, smoking, medical assistance. Here's the percentages of their engagements.
Kevin,
Yeah.
can you make that a little bigger for us, please? Can you pull it up on your screen so we can see it larger on ours?
Hold on.
Or at least the engagement detail chart. Thank you.
How's that? Is that better?
Much better.
Okay. So this is what types of engagements they engage in and the percentage of it. And the other benefit of that is down here, police requested. We don't want to be tying up 911 and law enforcement resources when we don't have to, when we can solve the problem with our personnel. So you see how many times where they've engaged, they've had to call the police, only 3.1%. That means, I'm not saying they don't call when there's a crime that's occurred, they do. But when there's 2 people, that we put it under the category of assault and battery, when there's 2 people arguing, 2 people fighting, causing a disturbance, a lot of times they remove the people from the system and are able to bring things back to normal without having to recall or request police assistance.
Kevin, thank you so much for sharing that data. It's great to see how data informs your decisions over at security.
I just want to hit
Appreciate
one
that.
more
Thank you.
thing for you. So, because you mentioned about complaints about the security guards not doing their jobs. So here's some, we put out basically a security analyst that work for CTA. They work for me. They go out every 3 shifts and monitor the teams in the field. We also utilize our camera system to do video monitoring to make sure the security guards are where they're at. They're looking the way they're supposed to be looking. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Here's 3 examples of them pretty much doing that. But you mentioned about the ones that aren't. So here's 3 examples of people not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Here's somebody, these are not from the canine teams either. Here's one guy hiding on an elevator, another guy out socializing, and 4 people congregating, looking at their phones, not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So, like I said, Action Canine has been probably the best performer. The other ones, so when we see this, depending on the type of violation or activity that they're doing, we either ask them to get retrained, reprimanded, or removed, if it's serious enough, removed from our contract. So I can't tell a private company to fire somebody, but I can tell them, I don't put them on our contract anymore. And
I see that.
They do comply with that. And on the police department, if an officer doesn't show up without a call or an excuse for special employment, they're suspended for, I think it's 2 or 3 months from the system. And it's a lot of money, and the officers like working CTA because it's a double benefit for them. Now, not only do they make good money, they also get Social Security credits, which they don't normally get from the city because the city does not pay into Social Security. So it's a double benefit. So it does work for us in that manner. The mass transit unit is responsible for monitoring them, deploying them, and supervising them.
Hey, Kevin, I've got a quick follow-up question regarding what you just stated about Social Security. So earlier when we were talking about the 60 million, I think you said it's kind of like pass through, like it goes through the CTA to the police department, which means that those checks would be cut by the police department, and like CTA wouldn't be tracking overtime, or there wouldn't be a separate check.
No,
But now there is a separate CTA check. Because I remember for the security meeting that people were excited that more officers were willing to work on their non-scheduled days for time and a half. So of the 60 million, how much of that goes to CPD to pay out? So then how are they getting a separate check from CTA?
No,
and all the security
you're,
money goes to CPD?
yeah, you're confusing, I think you misunderstood so the pass-through money it's called a pass-through grant, comes from the federal government. It specifically targets anti-terrorism activity. That goes directly to the police department through us. It never touches our budget, never reflected in our budget. It doesn't hire off-duty officers. This is an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Chicago Department of Police where we pay officers to work our system on their days off. They work in uniform, in a police car, working for the Chicago Police Department, carrying Chicago Police Department radios, just like an on-duty officer. There's no difference. That money, we get billed every month by the police department, and we pay that. And that's where the 60 million goes.
Got it. And it's billed for what is provided.
Yes.
If they don't provide it, we don't pay it, correct?
Oh,
It's not like a
correct,
flat
correct.
amount, like they
No,
get
it's
this
not a
amount every month.
blanket. It's not a
I can
blanket
give you an
amount.
example. I've had years from my time at City Hall where we've had to do a supplement too, because we've actually billed beyond,
Because it
it
exceeded.
exceeded the IGA authority, but it's billable. And I also saw with the private security contract, I thought that was a helpful bullet that there can be billing consequences if you see lack of performance or compliance as well, which.
Don't forget, we can also terminate for cause or for any reason at all. So on the police department, there's times we'll go over that budget, and I'm discussing trying to get more officers, because the reality is the city is facing, law enforcement in general is facing severe manpower shortages. And it's hard to get people to come on right now. It's completely different environment. So one way to combat that is to try to, we can hire more officers off duty. And the city has rules about how many hours they can work. That all falls under the police department.
Yes.
I read an interesting article that I found semi-appalling to me. It is that a cardboard cutout of a policeman in a crime area has almost the same effectiveness as a live person. It came out of the New York Times.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know that it's worthwhile to pursue.
Yeah, I don't think that was a question.
I'll just address it real quick. I had 32 years with the Chicago Police Department. I was a deputy chief. I can guarantee you, maybe back in the early 90s, the state police would park police cars out on the expressways, stuff like that. We even did in Chicago a little bit. It doesn't work anymore. Unfortunately, the lack of respect for authority figures, not just police, but just, you see how they treat our operators and firemen and everything like that. A lot of people just don't think they have to follow the rules. So you see a lot of people violating the law, violating rules, violating behavioral norms right in front of police officers. I was present for it with, we had about 10 kids jump turnstiles right in front of 8 uniformed Chicago police officers. When the police officer stopped them, a 15-year-old kid went into a fighting stance, told the policeman he's going to knock him out. So, I mean, that's just kind of the attitudes we're facing from some people, and unfortunately it's carried all over to throughout the city. But putting the cardboard cutouts isn't. I wouldn't suggest it.
Thank you, Kevin.
Any additional questions? for Kevin?
I was, I don't think at the moment, I was going to attempt to kind of reel it back. I think it was a good far-ranging discussion. But with the goal of trying to, synthesize this stuff into, points that we can communicate to the board. I've heard a couple of things out of this discussion. And I'm interested in the board's thoughts, or if they want to tweak, or maybe I'm mischaracterizing, but out of the original point from Ms. Pavlicek, sorry.
Yes.
Pronunciation. It does seem to be a question, and I think Tracy also mentioned kind of a similar situation that maybe was handled differently on just bus safety protocol, especially like intervention. It sounded like 2 instances of verbal abuse. One led to an intervention, one didn't. And if there is perhaps, there probably is a protocol that exists, but communicating that publicly, making that aware can also provide perceived and real comfort to riders as well. I think that's something that we could take back. I don't know. I'm putting that out there as one bullet. If you guys want to shoot it down, shoot it down. If I'm mischaracterizing what you were talking about, please, by all means, I don't want to speak for you as well.
I can tell you, if you can get information from the operations group on specifically what their operators are told to do, but they do have silent alarms. They can call the control center and notify us. And when they do hit the silent alarm on a bus, police usually get there pretty quick with the silent alarms. So there are protocols and responses in place.
Kevin, I don't know if you heard me earlier, but I just want to say thank you for sharing that data. It's great to see how CTA uses and tracks that security data in order to effectively manage how dollars are spent and keep track of the impact that it's having on safety. So I just want to thank you for sharing that data.
Anytime. Yeah, we not only use the internal data, I have access to the police department raw data. So I go through and look what happened every day. I talk to the commander of the public transportation unit every day, and I talk to the superintendent and the upper command staff usually on a monthly basis. So try to keep CTA up front and center with them to ensure, the police department has a lot of balls in the air with the whole city, but we try to keep, make sure that we're one of the front runners for them, and normally they do. So.
Thank you.
I had one final just clarification question. You mentioned the CTA, a mass transit unit. Where is that housed? I just want to make sure I've got that understood correctly.
The mass transit unit is part of the Bureau of Counterterrorism. It is housed at 18th and State.
Sorry, not physically, sorry, organizationally, yeah.
It's housed at 18th and State physically in the 1st District, but it reports up to the Chief of Counterterrorism.
Got it, within the police department.
Yes, sir.
Got it, thank you.
Anytime.
Right, is there, there wasn't a bullet on that. I did intend for that to be something we discussed. I know that was it was a hot button, and I think it's not just at CTA as well. The off-duty fund, it often comes up for questioning at the city level as well. Is that something that we want to mention to the board? I don't know. I don't have a direction yet gathered from the conversation. I think there was a lot of helpful information there, but I still sense that people have questions about how that's structured, how it's utilized, who tells whom to go where, when.
Yeah, I felt like I got a little bit different information today than we got in our security briefing,
Sure.
Which doesn't, it creates more questions for me than it does provide answers. I think ultimately though, because I do clearly remember, and I think other people have acknowledged remembering, that they kept referring to when CPD has capacity.
Yes.
And that's where I'm kind of lost, right? And I remember specifically saying in that meeting that, it's a lot of money to spend on security and not know whether or not you're getting it. So, I don't want to, beat a dead horse. Like I'm not saying that there's anything improper going on. What I am saying though is like, I felt like some of the things that were being celebrated in that meeting, like the fact that more off-duty police officers were willing to work for time and a half. I don't think that's a good strategy to rely on when people are willing to work overtime for a regular security situation. So to me, it's just, I guess, getting a better understanding of what that is. I don't know that I don't necessarily have a complaint or a gripe or even a comment because I don't really understand how it works.
Well, the officer, I'll give it to you real quick. The officers sign up a month in advance. So they sign up on their days off. They usually, unless it's an emergent situation where the city has to cancel everybody's days off, that very rarely happens. If you look, our expenditures over the last year, we filled the daily roster assignments, I would say well over 95% of the time. Might be a little bit lower because of the convention. That was, kind of an outlier. But we do fill, and especially, you had a good point there, because especially prior to we raising the rate to time and a half, we often did not fill it. And that was one of the issues. Now we are filling it. And we are paying more than anybody else. This is what the city pays for overtime programs for the department in general. So we just came up to what the union gets for everything else.
Kevin, on an average, how much overtime do we rely on from CPD in our schedule?
90 officers a day.
So to me, it seems like if we're paying time and a half for 90 officers a day, it seems like there's enough need there to just hire the officers and pay regular time as opposed to time and a half. Because if we're paying time and a half of that is going towards, just salary, as opposed to if you just had the officers scheduled, you'd save half your budget. Is this a staffing issue, and is that a CTA decision or a police CPD decision?
It's kind of everything. So
Yeah,
don't forget, we're paying for their salary, their pay. If we have to pay for them to be hired, we've got to pick up all the benefits. Or it has to be, the whole IGA would have to be renegotiated. And I'm not saying it's a bad idea. In fact, it's being looked into to find out what the feasibility of it is, because there's portions of the IGA that really would have to be restructured to ensure. I wouldn't want to go into an agreement like that unless I had an agreement that those officers that are hired, not specific officers, just numbers of officers, would be staying on CTA, like a guarantee that minimum manpower is this, and we need that to protect us. But right now, this is what the framework of the IGA is, so we have to stay within that.
Yeah, I think we're speaking the same language, Kevin.
I think what the point of my earlier question wasn't a finance issue. It was, are there other solutions that could be creative, that could solve the security issues on a bus or on a train? I don't know that there are, because I don't see any others. But does anybody else see other solutions? I mean, we have cameras every place on those buses. We have cameras on the L lines. We have police. Are there other solutions that might make them safer? I don't know.
I'll say two things. One, regarding perceptions of safety, right? If you look at the research, the research says that perceptions of safety are highest when you have diversity of age and gender in any space, right? So you want from kids all the way up to elderly. If I'm traveling like in the morning on bus, whatever, you see all these kids going to school on public transit, on buses. You know, in Chicago, our kids don't take public buses to go. I'm talking like elementary school kids. You have like 7, 8-year-olds hopping on the public transit in New York City, and they take the bus to school. In Chicago, we have this whole private class of busing that they don't have enough bus drivers, kids can't get picked up. And you never see little kids riding the bus to school. You'll see teenagers. And sometimes when you have, and if you look at what the research says, you can have too much of one demographic and it makes it feel unsafe, right? So if you're like, you know, a 55-year-old and you get on a bus and it's like 50 teenagers on there, that's not the safest environment. But if you had like that diversity of like, how do we get like younger kids? And you ask yourself as a system, as a city, do people have the faith in CTA to put small children on a bus to go to school? And so to me, getting back to what your question is around like what can be done, well, if we kind of examine how we choose to do business here in the city and how much money goes to pay private busing institutions, right? To get kids from point A to point B. I know some of examples where we're paying on the public school side, they're having for a full bus, a driver, the whole 9 yards for 5 kids to get to school. Right. And so thinking through and those, you know, thinking about intergovernmental agreements and how do we get to a system where Chicago Public Schools is relying on public transit to get kids from point A to point B, because right now it's just not the norm. And I think a lot of work can go into how do we work towards that, right? As CTA, as the city of Chicago, as Chicago Public Schools. And then the other thing I just wanted to point out, so one is like, how do we get kids on CTA to improve perceptions of public safety? And then secondly, I think in terms of my own experience riding the bus, my wife's experience riding the bus, there's a lot to be said about when buses don't show up when they're supposed to, right? Because I know many times if we're waiting for a bus, whether it's the daytime, whether it's the nighttime, sometimes it's in areas that you just don't want to be there for long periods of time because of what's happening around you. And so when one bus doesn't show up and then 2 buses don't show up, eventually you just kind of start building it into your travel plan. Yeah, I can't trust that. So I'm not going to put myself in a situation, or I don't want my wife to put herself in a situation where she's going to wait at this stop because of the amount of experiences we have of like phantom buses, right? But I will also say, right, to CTA's credit, there have been many times when I've been at an event downtown in the evening and I try to get a ride share back to South Lawndale and I can't.
Right.
I'll have 5 different riders be like, oh, they'll accept it and then they cancel. They accept it and cancel. And I always have Old Faithful CTA because while it wasn't my first choice, I know that bus, you know, a few may not come, but one's going to finally come and I'm going to get on that bus and it's going to take me home. Right. So, you know, it's great to have like that, you know, that backup. But at the same time, I think when we don't think, you know, a bus doesn't come or 2 buses don't come and it's a security issue, but it really is.
So I think those are great points. I'm going to piggyback that to one. I'll just translate it, or I'll transfer to rail. We're already there anyway. And I think I was going to kick it off with the overarching point that I think you nailed so well is that I think to whatever degree we can quantify it, that would be great. But I get the overarching sense from everyone here that we should be asking ourselves how much of security and safety issues are operations issues as well, and how much operations can go towards alleviating a lot of this stuff. You know, we talk about the CPD, IGAs, we talk about private security. How much pressure off of those contracts can we take by, and there's real dollars and cents to be weighed here, but having more buses run, having a more reliable service, having let's be ambitious, like a farther reaching service, right? You know, I remember a time, well, I don't remember a time. I do remember a time, and this is going outside of my, I guess, professional purview. I get weird looks if I'm going out to bars and stuff with my friends and I'm taking the bus there, right? Or I'm taking the bus home because it's not seen as a safe or viable option, perception or otherwise. There's a loop, there's a feedback loop in there somewhere that if we can break it somewhere as a agency, I think we, you know, we hit a couple of birds with that one stone. And I think that's a question that I think there's an intuitive sense that everyone kind of agrees with it, but I think we should be forefronting it more. And to whatever degree we could add numbers, dollars, data to make that make more sense, I think we should be pushing that. And I hear that also personally, but I also hear that from our safety working groups and stuff at BOMA. So
I have just one response, and I'm gonna hang back so other people can, just my one response would just be, I don't necessarily think on the operational side, it's more bus, like, I don't think
Sure.
more service, right? I think it could even be less service, but just consistent service, right? Because I don't think operationally, like, people want to hear, oh, we need more buses, more drivers, that all requires money. I think, you know, whenever I hear CTA providing solutions, it's like more. But I think what would be more ideal is just whatever we can do and be consistent, like be great at a schedule. And then once we're great at that schedule, like we have like very minimal, you know, ghost buses. I don't usually hear it with trains, it's usually buses, or I experience it with trains, it's usually buses. But when we can do that, like, you know, in our sleep, then we talk about more routes or more buses. But I think the biggest challenge that we have as an institution is we tend to grow when we're not really delivering what we're already. I'm gonna stop right there.
I think it's interesting you say that because, you know, my group, we've been tracking, CTA reliability for a couple of years now. And one thing that we've noticed is that we mostly track rails specifically just because it's easier to put out and track. But on paper, it says, oh, we have like a close to pre-pandemic rail schedule. But at the same time, we're only getting maybe 70 or 80% of the scheduled trains actually showing up. And sometimes we get real weird headways like, oh, we've got 2 trains that are coming within 5 minutes of each other, and then there's no train for 20 minutes. And that I think is what it makes people a little wary about using the CTA because it's not as consistent in the service that it delivers, and people feel safer when they don't have to wait. A lot of riders that I've talked to have said, you know, this is a lot. Like I mostly feel unsafe when I'm at the bus stop, at the train station and waiting around as opposed to like when I'm actually on board because there's a lot more security. I know personally, I think it's interesting, Robert Johnson, your comment about people looking at you funny about the bar. Like I know I'm the type of person, like I will take the bus to or from wherever I'm going and instead of ride sharing, just because even though I've had some incidents, I generally feel safer riding a bus back and forth. And I think it's really just like that safety perception. Like if people kind of know that they're being watched and that someone's looking out for them, they're going to feel a lot safer.
Caroline, are you saying that you feel safer riding the bus than ride sharing or using is that what you just?
Yeah, generally speaking, I do feel safer when I'm riding a bus. But I know that's not the case for everybody. I often hear people say like, I don't want to take the bus at night, like it's unsafe. I've personally never had an issue with a late night bus. A couple of harassment incidents that I have had have actually happened either during the day or like earlier in the evening. I think the one I was talking about happens at probably 7 or 8 PM, so not very late at all. One final comment, I know, I think we should probably take a follow-up with operations, especially on some of these protocols and the reliability aspect of it. I particularly want to know about like the silent alarms, what those are, if there's anything we can leverage to have operators, maybe not every situation that happens on a bus requires police assistance. Like, I don't personally think that any of the instances that I've experienced on the bus have required a police response, but more just like having a second person there to help de-escalate the situation, potentially asking a rider to leave if they're not willing to comply, things like that. I think also just being able to talk to maybe specific bus operators who might be willing to share some of their experiences, like what may make them feel more comfortable intervening in a situation if there is an incident happening on their bus.
Can I make a comment on, I'm hearing a lot of safety talk in operations and so there's things that we can innovate in terms of feeling safer or ridership safety, the perception of ridership safety. That has nothing to do with operations, maybe just a little bit, or doesn't have to do with the, budgets. I'll share just one quick experience riding on the Orange Rail. It cost nothing for the conductor to deliver a good morning, warm-hearted, felt message. That was the most beautiful experience I've ever had on CTA when the conductor I felt was a human and wished me a very good morning. And so that energy is contagious. And so that costs nothing in the budget, maybe some training, but I think operationally, there needs to be some discussion in terms of creating experiences for the riders.
Customer service.
The etiquette, the culture, creating a culture in the ridership versus reacting to that experience that we all have. That's, yeah, I'll stop there.
Along that similar line, one of the things I've done for years and years and years, if I'm waiting someplace and there's somebody else there, I make it a point to at least get 3 words out of them because I'll feel more comfortable now that I have experienced a little bit about them and what I can expect. And even in those circumstances, I have been on to walk another block or stop, having perceived that 3-second conversation wasn't satisfying in my personal safety.
Thank you. Caroline, for just note-taking purposes, would it be fair to characterize that it sounds like most of your concern arises, or your more severe concerns arise not during the trip, it's awaiting the trip?
Yeah.
Right? Is that fair for buses and trains? I'm talking platforms, essentially.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, I would say, myself and most riders I've talked to generally feel at least safe when they're waiting.
Okay.
I know I talked about like one instance where I was actually harassed on board, but I've had a few more instances. I would say it's more common for somebody to be harassing me like while I'm at a bus stop or at a rail station. I've had people like yell very inappropriate things at me just while I was waiting for the bus
Okay.
or the train.
Thank
I
you.
mean, in terms of like robbery and violent crime, doesn't that usually happen outside of train stations? Like I hear most complaints about the red line are not on the train itself. It's outside any station south of name your station, you know? So that's my perspective on crime.
Okay, great. I think that's a perfect point to deliver. I also was going to add, this is again, downtown business. Just adding on to the perception, it's had a very real impact downtown. I will, we often hear safety on the commute as a big reason why people aren't returning to office. Now, we can weigh how much that is a real concern why people are not returning to office, but it often polls quite high up there. And so, we see that as a severe economic impact. And then also, we have labor relationships and, the perception of safety on the commute, it's escalated to the point where one of our union partners has activated a clause in their CBA asking to bargain over formal action addressing their employees' ability to come and go to work safely. It's not to dismiss. I don't want to just say it's just perception, and they've come with numbers, but overarching, the larger problem is that they do not feel safe getting off of their jobs. I'm talking, security, janitorial staff for buildings late at night, early in the morning.
Rob, what typically are the shifts as it relates to this janitorial staff?
5 to 1:30. 5 to 1:30
in the morning.
And I will say, to CPD and CTA's credit, they have been participants when they formed this group. It is a clause in the CBA agreement for the janitorial staff, and we formalized a group, and public safety has come to the table, but it's still remarkable that it has come to the point where they formally utilized a bargaining clause to address it. The other one I will add, and I know that there's probably a diversity of perspectives, but I'll put it out there. It comes up often, is fare evasion. And it's not for necessarily public safety on the train primarily it's rail on the trains. It is public safety concerns that after they do some after the fact or for an incident in the loop, and it could be something very serious. It could be an attempted robbery. It could be something less serious, but still quite dangerous. Thrill seekers trying to illegally get to rooftops. When we work with public safety, and they use cameras and stuff, oftentimes, and I don't have numbers, I will say that, oftentimes they've used CTA and they've found that they have evaded fare. They use it to access it. And there is a feeling that if more was done to make it difficult to access, you are making it at least harder for, let's say, a teenage kid playing, skipping school for the day to try to get to the top of Aon Center. That's not real. I'm just naming a tall building downtown. But it is something that we would like to see explored. And I know in other agencies, they have taken steps, whether it be personnel or just infrastructure.
So I have a comment, piggyback on what you just said about crime happening around CTA stops, and then thinking about perceptions of public safety. I know some of my experience in the past, I had a standing meeting for like a year and a half where I always had to get off at the Clark and Lake stop. And for my whole year and a half that I would get off on that stop, prior to that 1.5 year commitment, somebody had thrown some type of like food item on the doors getting out from the Clark and Lake stop to get in, to go down the escalator. And in the whole year and a half, that food stain was on those doors. And so like another experience, right? I usually will get onto the Pink Line from the 82 bus right there by Ogden and Central Park. And there was like a 2-year period, this was like a few years ago, where they put a lot of salt on. So like, they're maintaining the winter, putting a lot of salt on. But that salt stayed on those stairs for 2 years. And I literally watched that salt eat away at the iron in those stairs. And every day I would go up this, or whenever I would go up the stairs, not every day, whenever I go up the stairs, I'm like, I can't believe the salt is still here, right? And so I wonder two things, right? Understanding that perception of public safety is about people, but it's also about built environment, right? And I wonder for our contracting partners, if that is built into what they're, 'cause I'm not gonna say that, operationally, like people are just choosing to ignore these things, right? But I'm sure, like with every other maintenance type thing, like there's so much to do. Like you're just, you're emptying the garbage cans and you're doing this and this gets scheduled. But I wonder for our partners who are doing like private security, whether we can kind of put some type of like checklist in there for like, are you because what you're there to observe and to monitor. And I think you could definitely make the argument that when maintenance is allowed to like these, I'm not talking about like, repairing rails. I'm talking about like, cleaning something that's obviously not supposed to be there or like getting rid of salt that, it was, winter was like 4 months ago and there's still salt all over the stairs. But I wonder, I would assume it's not part of their responsibility to be filling out like, but at the same time, you have people who are in these spaces for 8 hours at a time. And so if you're going to be there, why not like have a way to report, the garbage can that hasn't been emptied in 2 days, or the food stain on the door, or the salt that is piled up in a big corner and this stair, right? Because I think if we're creating those tickets that people are watching, people are seeing, right? And I think as a rider, when you go through and you see something that's obviously wrong, this food stain should not be on here for 2 rides, right? In 1 week, let alone for a year and a half. I think that would be helpful for perceptions of safety, which kind of gets back to that. If, I think somebody said if people know you're watching, then they're gonna be less likely to, participate in risky behavior. Well, that says somebody's watching, right? When everything's always being taken care of.
Well, it gets back to what Sonia was saying about setting the environment.
Yes.
And being intentional about at every point, making sure that environment is one that's welcoming.
Yeah.
So to comment off of yours and then yours, that's all about, like seeing that food stain. And I don't know if that necessarily goes into like those private companies. It's more so bus maintenance, rail maintenance facilities, because it's been, very cold. And those trains I've heard on radio and going out of, these trains are having suspension failures. I don't know. Well, from a person that knows rail cars and things of that nature, on the red line, we have the Bombardier 5000s. When those trains get a red suspension failure, you have to unload the train. You can't ride it because it's a safety issue. So now you're thinking, okay, I can't trust the train. And now I got to stand in the freezing cold at 69th on the red line to wait for another train that I know that's going to be highly packed. So again, to thinking these people need to actually start like reviewing that, because again, like you're betraying these people's trust in, the Chicago Transit Authority. And again, like, okay, I can sit here and I have to wait. You got salt, you got those food stains, you got these trains I'm seeing back and forth on the Dan Ryan that haven't been cleaned. Like, what are we doing? Because you're running the same train every single day. You're running the same bus every single day. It might not be the same operator, but again, it's that like you're paying attention. I'm seeing it. Why haven't maintenance seen it? How come rail maintenance haven't seen anything? How come bus maintenance seen anything? And then as far as your conversation about, fare evasion, the customer service assistants, and then about the actual employees, the operators, the bus operators, rail operators, customer service assistants, making them feel safe. Some of those people don't want to intervene, and these are certain people that I have great relationships with. They don't want to intervene and think about 8, 9 o'clock at night. you have one operator for that whole 8-car Constance, and you're walking back because somebody's smoking and they assault you and they do something. Who's gonna take over the train, number one, and where are their safety? Because they're out there by themselves. They're in control of that train, they're in control of that bus. So how do you make them feel safe? Because those are the frontline employees. Those are the people that make sure we're getting to where we need to, the city of Chicago gets to where they need to at the same time. So going back to that, yeah, I feel that, operators, they need that safety, but again, that's again, another betraying of the trust of, okay, I can't trust this, I can't get there. So what are we gonna do and how are we gonna solve that? You gotta piggyback.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, two comments. One, I love the fact that you love trains and buses so much that manufacturers and model numbers. And two, so from what I was kind of saying though was, I think what I'm kind of looking at, like, what I'm not trying to do is add to, I'm sure operations wants to keep, whoever's employed to keep it clean and to keep it going.
Right.
I'm sure they're doing everything they can do. So that's the assumption, right? People are working within their capacity. All I'm suggesting is that when we have these relationships with private contractors, recognizing that the cleanliness and the built environment of the station also contributes to perceptions of public safety.
Right.
And then having something within that agreement that, hey, here's a way that you can report things so that we can get it within our operation system.
Right.
So that it could be flagged for somebody to do, right? That's all I'm saying, right? I'm not saying that people are neglecting their jobs of keeping the rail system clean or light bulbs changed or whatever it is. But I know the more ways that we can create for people to feed into that ticket system of how work is reported gets done, I think we'd benefit from it.
And you said that well, basically the moral of the story is holding them accountable. And the many times I've rode public transportation, I talk to different people, you want to make sure, because I'm seeing these security guards, they're on their phones, they're sitting there, somebody's cursing, somebody's smoking, and they're not going to go up to them, but I'm like, we're paying these people. So like, where's that money going? How is that getting? I'm like, so this is what we're paying for. And it's like, you're sitting on your behind making money when we're actually trying to say something. We're not doing anything. So, that goes to that point of holding them accountable.
Thank you. I think you did raise a very good point that safety and security should also extend to the staff and
Right.
the operators as well. I think we probably take it for granted, but it is worth explicitly saying. Go ahead.
Let me reinforce the issue of cleanliness for all of you. In the 80s, I owned a bar in a dodgy neighborhood. We increased our business by 40% after I got the neighbors organized in 2 blocks to go out and do something very simple. We cleaned the street once a week, regardless of what the city street sweepers did. We went out and cleaned it and made it look good. So part of the perception of safety is still cleanliness. And I too am not saying that the CTA avoids that or doesn't do their job by any means, but the solution to making sure it happens all the time, perhaps there is a mechanism, as you have suggested, that could augment what we're doing to help that occur well.
Tracy?
Yeah, so, I do want to jump on that. Operating 7 locations for me and multiple properties that we own and manage. One of the things that we learned, and these are properties in all of our neighborhoods, south, west side, you name it. Graffiti for once. When the graffiti hits a building, first thing you do is take it off right away. Because really what happens when you let things like that sit, people say, oh, and then you'll see graffiti on top of that. And it's just really like the perception that this is not the place that I'm going to be able to affect. You know what I'm saying? Like it really happens. One of the things that we do, even on the management level, I have 7 store managers, and then I've got a person that goes by with a 50-point checklist every morning to check on them. And so I think part of what we're seeing is it could be a breakdown. So I heard people say, I'm sure they're not trying. Some people just don't do a good job. It's just reality. Yeah, some people aren't that good. And I've seen it. But what we do is we have to get the next level is then. And then, of course, the final level is when I come by and I'm looking, I'm like, what's going on here? You know what I'm saying? And so then I call the guy who was supposed to check on the guy, who's supposed to check on the guy. I mean, and it can go, but it has to be done. So if you walk in a Momentum store, you're gonna see clean floors, you're gonna see, you know, and that even on the bus system and stuff, and I'm not sure, I'm sure CTA understands management too, but just really, when you go into our different neighborhoods, Inglewood and Roseland, sometimes, you know, it's just, people may not have the same expectation that you have for your space. And so you want to set that expectation that I don't care what neighborhood this is, you're gonna be safe, it's gonna be clean, and things are gonna run, and people are gonna be polite and that kind of thing. So I think we're really kind of talking about some management stuff, really, but yeah, everybody needs that, you know.
Can I ask, perhaps an ignorant question? I just never had firsthand experience. Is CTA in the 311 kind of tree? Does that make sense? To his point, about graffiti, for example, you know, you
So
see graffiti on a wall, you hit 311,
Right.
or you go to the app and
I think one thing that this is,
Maybe I could step out of being secretary of the board for 4 seconds. You know, it was, you know, you see JC DeRue or whatever the name of the.
Oh, DeCoe,
company is.
yes, JC DeCoe.
Yeah. So you see that, right? You've seen it for years.
but when we get to a CTA bus stop, we still feel like we're sitting on CTA property and we're not, right?
Yeah.
We're not.
Yeah.
So you,
Furniture.
so whether you see a vagrant person sitting in a space or living in that space for weeks.
Or you walk, it was in perfectly great shape the day before and the next day it's shattered.
Busted out.
And they busted out the entire glass, or there's graffiti written on it. None of that is CTA's responsibility. But it still makes, you know, when you say, are we in the 311 tree? That's a city/city vendor
Thing
Okay.
that
a lot of times I think CTA unfairly gets
stuck with the buck for, because we don't run around saying that's not our property either. I think we have a desire to make all of our bus stops safe, no matter where they are. Train stations and bus stops, right? So
that's one thing, like 311 tree. I'll defer to April or whoever might be in cyberspace to help us answer that.
when it comes to your trip and what Caroline was talking about, the assault on the bus, right?
Yeah.
And well, do I have an expectancy that this bus driver is going to help? Actually, probably not. They're not armed. They are not police power. Did she have an opportunity at that moment to dial 911 or whatever? Yeah, absolutely. Would that have upended and created a big old, probably, but that is her go. That's all of our go-to for safety,
Is to actually call the Chicago Police Department, no matter.
whether we are on a CTA truck, bus, train, rail, stop, or whatever. So back to your 311 question, I'll let April answer it if she can. Are we in the 311 tree?
You know, generally the answer is yes.
Okay.
CTA is in regular communication with OEMC 311. So depending on what the issue is, it may be a 311, 911 issue. If it's on CTA property, like if you're talking about graffiti on a train.
Yeah.
then that's-
Or in a
that's
station.
what-
Yeah.
That's an operations issue, and there is a process, the guy checking on the guy, checking on the guy. There is a protocol for that internally as well, so it really depends on what the issue, where it happens, and you know, what the protocol is for.
So I know the CTA has the customer service kind of interface. You've unrolled the chatbot and the like. If I'm Joe Citizen and I see graffiti on the side of my building, I hit 311. If I'm Joe Citizen and I see graffiti or defacement or something and a CTA, let's say in the station itself, and we're talking about generating tickets and kind of like work orders and stuff like that, or you would have to go through the CTA route. Is that fair to characterize, or could I also hit
Yeah, the channels for reporting things that you see on the system. Chatbot is the newest mechanism for that. I believe on the back end of it, that would be reported the same way as call it in.
Okay.
And say, hey, I see graffiti on my train. And then also, you know, reaching out, I think, via email, through customer feedback. Those are the channels currently. And of course, we, you know, CPA, our innovation group, this is an area that they're working on evolving so that it's easier for, you know, for customers to identify and report. But then it's also easier for them to hear feedback that it was taken care of. You know.
Sure, yeah. I guess, and what and I don't think this is a CTA specific problem. It might not even be a problem. But I think about oftentimes, I think you characterize it really well, where you want it to make it easier for a rider to report a problem, but also hear that it got fixed. And oftentimes there's different channels, right? What if I'm on a Metra train and I see something that I want to report? What I'm curious about, and I don't know, is does that, I don't want to say get lost, that's the wrong word, but if I don't use that right channel, and then I don't hear back that it's gotten addressed because I use 311 instead of, I don't know, Metro customer service or CTA customer service, you've got that customer now that's kind of, well, I saw this and I did something and you guys don't do anything, you know, and it's, I don't have the grand solution, but it's, you know, trying to avoid something that you probably really would have taken care of. You probably did take care of it without this customer submitting the request. Maybe it was 2 days later or 3 days later than if it was complaint driven, it maybe within 24, 48 hours or something, right? But there's still that lingering kind of, well, CTA doesn't do, you know, that's.
Yeah, no, I think.
And that's a miscommunication. That's not a, you guys aren't doing anything, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, I'll let her answer and then I'll come to you.
Just very quickly, if, I would encourage you all to look at the January board meeting. If you have a chance, you don't have to watch the whole thing, but our innovation group presented to the board an agreement with GSA 18F, which will explore some technologies that would streamline this very process of how feedback is funneled through internally, how it's addressed, and then how do we circle back and communicate that to the customer. So that's an issue that CTA is working on in real time. A component of that the board has asked for within that work, because the agreement is actually for a consultant to come in and advise CTA on what the best technology would be for that. The board has asked for some input from our advisory group, from stakeholders on what they would like to see in those communications. So I would just encourage you to take a listen to that and then also stay tuned for opportunities to get that feedback.
Right. Perhaps they could come here for a meeting,
Yes.
if possible, something to explore.
And also, I'm gonna
Sorry.
do a shameless commercial right quick. Sorry, Ryan. I did send everyone a request to fill out that survey last week. Has everyone gotten it, filled it out? I will resend.
Yeah, please. I don't think I,
Sorry, Ryan.
or it went to the wrong buckets.
You said you filled it out. Nope.
Nobody filled it out.
I did it. These are my list of things to do.
Yes,
This is a follow-up for Bus Vision.
and it was
Yes.
Request to.
be a part of that conversation, and I don't know how many of you all have yet thus been a part of that conversation yet, but I do want each one of you to fill that survey out. So that email went out last week. Brian?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, just for time, we've got like 30 minutes left, and I wanted to thank you, Robert, for taking like really good notes during the meeting and clarifying with us like what we're talking about with regards to what we bring back to the board. I feel like some of the issues I brought up last meeting about these impacts we have been heard, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm kind of brainstorming with regards to all of the issues we've brought up and all of the systemic systems is that we're unhappy with the current relationship with CPD, right? We don't have a minimum level of officers guaranteed. We, if we wanted data on what those officers are doing, I know getting information out of CPD can be difficult depending on the issue. And historically, back in 1979, the CTA disbanded our own police force. We had a police force that was solely dedicated to the safety and security of CTA. That was a long time ago, and the world's very different now. But I wonder if there would be any interest amongst the board, amongst us, to ask the board if we could get some kind of study estimating cost and benefits of reinstating the CTA police force.
So I have a note on mine talking about, there just generally seems to be a level of additional clarity that we're kind of seeking with regard to just the whole public safety structure with CPD in particular. It sounds like, is it Kevin Ryan? Apologies.
That was Kevin Ryan.
It sounds like they are already tooling around, trying to look for alternatives. I think, and again, this is for the board, I was going to include a note, something that we encourage them to look at alternatives and additional, in the feasibility of additional arrangements. We can say up to, you know, looking at the CPD police force model as well. Now, I think that gives the range of changing, right, what exists now up to reestablishing your own autonomous police force. And that's not, it's asking them to take a look at it and the pros, the cons and all of that without saying you need to reestablish a CPD. Is that a fair point to take back to the board?
I'd like to discuss narrowing the range of things we're asking for. If we want this to be a accountable relationship between us and the board, I wonder if we could try asking for something specific and hearing what they say. If they even say, hey, we did the preliminary study into doing the study and the costs and benefits of even doing the study of a CTA police force says it's not feasible, I'd be happy with that. That's at least a great groundwork for ongoing communications, a good relationship.
If I can bump in real quick, the April or Georgette, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the board has authorized a study into the feasibility cost in the president's office as well. The feasibility and cost of reinstating a police force and the CTA. So that's already being looked at. And as far as CPD data, I get that pretty good. So I know what they're doing, where they're doing it at, and how much they're doing. And if you go on the Chicago Police Department website, chicagopolice.org, and I believe it's inside the CPD, you'll see dashboards. CPD now posts a dashboard with index major crimes and activity. Just kind of like a high level overview, but it is posted and updated monthly. So just another source of information for the public.
Yeah, thank you. That's amazing to hear. Are there any deadlines with regards to the study on the CTA police force?
I don't have that. I've done some preliminary for the, I mean, I'm not getting into personal opinions, but here's the logistics of it, just to keep in the back of your mind. We currently are serviced by a 10,000 man Chicago Police Department, 10,000 plus. I think the CTA would require at the very minimum a 300 man department, preferably a 400 man. Austin, Texas is in the process of fielding a police force for their metropolitan transit system. It took them 2 years to hire a chief, 3 years to get them sworn in. They're coming up on year 4 and they're going to put out their first group of officers, which is a grand total of 8. Like I said, with the mass transit unit right now is 200 plus It should be bigger. I'd like it to be bigger, but that's what it is. And we've also got approximately, there's, I don't know, 5,000-6,000 more officers in every police district. And they respond to the CTA as well. So it's not just hiring. A police force gives you a group of people that are beholden to you, your agency. What it doesn't give us though is there's a lot of things that are needed with a police force: training, policy, vehicles, infrastructure, buildings. Who's going to?
Thank you, Kevin. I expect all of that in the study,
Yeah.
but we've got 20 minutes left in our meeting.
That's it though. It is being looked at. So, sorry.
Thank you.
I think to that end, I don't have a problem echoing the board's statement as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I absolutely love it if in our report, just we're interested. That's all I'd ask. Like we're interested in the progress of the study and look forward to it coming up.
I've often just sidebar on the same topic though. I've wrestled with the need of a police force or and as opposed to that professionalized security, like CTA professionalized security, because I have the tremendous amount of respect for Chicago Police Department, but their job is not the same anymore. The police are not the police of like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. And to a certain degree, a lot of times police officers are more like security guards now, what we would have seen 10, 15 years ago. And considering what the bar is for sworn officers and how much has to happen in order to do that, as opposed to professionalized security. So CTA having their own professionalized security group who then would rely on CPD, because I think the threshold of cost is going to be much lower. And all those, we're not dealing with police powers, you're not doing all that stuff. But at the same time, I think that CTA needs to be in control of its own security destiny. And so we have no control over the police department and we have no control over private security contractors. So in essence, we don't control our security. And so the idea of an internal professionalized security system or security, team, I think I like that more than saying we're jumping the hurdle to full police. Because to Kevin's point, I can only imagine how long that's going to take, right? And yeah, as opposed to having having steps towards an immediate result right now.
I would echo that sentiment and just having this, the security fall under an umbrella where it's an overall experience where you don't feel you're being policed, or you don't feel that there's anticipation of something horrible happening or witnessing something, that you don't want to see, but just an overall, a plan where you bring in the security under a broader plan and that will guarantee or lead towards a more pleasant experience for all.
I think, sorry, I didn't.
Where you don't, it could be a combination of, some budget allocation for that, but also, the operations and the training for that, for the conductors or whatever staff that is to, take charge of that culture.
Okay. Well, given that it seems like there is a study that is somewhere already underway or already being under consideration. I don't know.
Formal at this point.
But yeah, exploration, under review. We can echo that sentiment along with, exploring other alternative solutions as well. But I don't think even in this meeting, we're not going to name like the 3 things that will work, but we know there is something already under consideration. We know that there's something that doesn't go the full way as well. And we think it's worth looking into the potential effectiveness, whether they are, there's a lawyerly term for it that I'm spacing on right now, but kind of like the EPA review, the first best alternative or something like that. Sorry, did you have, were you done or
I'm okay with letting discussion continue.
Okay, great.
I also like to think about like other solutions that are beyond just like police or security for, some of these. I know, we're talking about like reporting graffiti and stuff. I know like I had an instance a couple weeks ago where I saw graffiti on a bus and I had to go onto the CTA website, find the contact form. I have it bookmarked, so it was easier for me, but like for the average rider, they may not necessarily see that. But I was thinking like, if you report something to 311 that's a problem on Park District property, like for example, if there's like graffiti on a Park District property, if there's fly dumping on a Park District property, they are able to transfer that service request to the Park District. And I was wondering if there's any possibility to have something like that for CTA, like if somebody, reports, okay, there's graffiti on like this L stop, like within the CTA property.
So is that back to the 311 tree?
Yeah, I think that's what we're sort of looking into. It
Yeah.
sounds like they are,
Yeah.
don't quite know the lay of the land now, but it sounds like something that they want to.
It's out in the public domain, people already know to do it, it's
Yeah.
something that is
Real-
not, they don't have to look up.
Yeah.
Accessible is already, maybe in their head.
311 requests are sent.
Connect that with CTA.
Yeah, and then the other thing with reporting CTA stuff is if it's like on a bus or a train or something without a fixed location, but it's still CTA property. 311 requires you to put in an address every time you have a service request. So I'm wondering if if somebody responds like, is this on, there could be a question, say the graffiti reporting form, it's like, is this on CTA property, yes or no? And if it is, allow the person to add like a bus or rail car number to the report. And then secondly, I know I've talked about this before, but like, has there been any thought given to creating, I know we have the chatbot, but a lot of the time it doesn't understand natural language or anything beyond basic things like smoking. Has there been any thought given to having like a text for safety system? Like I know in the Twin Cities Metro Transit, they have a number, they post it in the light rail cars. And it's like, if you have a problem, if you see something going on that's suspicious, text this number and you can discreetly report it. And a dispatcher is there and they can route the call appropriately, whether that's to station staff or to like police, to security, things like that.
I think I've heard, April, have you heard that?
I've heard that as a
I've heard that.
suggestion.
I've heard, yeah.
I would recommend that to amplify it because that is a suggestion that's come up more than once.
Thank you.
Yes,
And
definitely.
Floating. I don't recall if we've gotten a report on it or if it's just been something that Innovations has talked to us.
I think I recall it from an innovations discussion. And Kevin, just noting, I saw your text, thank you. Or your chat through, so it looks like 311 requests on CTA property are forwarded to the CTA control center.
Yeah, no, there's still improvements to the form that could be made.
Oh, sure, sure.
Especially as it relates to reporting things that are on a bus or train without a fixed address.
Yeah, to that point. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
We had that trouble with dog parks. Because the dog park doesn't have an address. We had to resort to using the address of the Park District building closest to the dog park, which really wasn't that effective.
Mhm. Yeah, and sometimes they're like, oh, that address doesn't exist. I'm like, no, it is right there. I took a picture of it and I described where it is.
Yeah, so just piggyback on what you were saying, I spent a lot of time on the Shy 311 app. The City of Chicago, AMC, amazing app, Shy 311. And for many years, I'd be like, man, I keep requesting that this graffiti on the train or at the park that be removed, and it would never get removed. And what I learned was that everybody has their own system. The Park District had a phone number you were supposed to call, and nobody answers. You leave a message, and then you just trust that it's going to get in that system. The Park District is moving towards being more umbrellaed into that system as well. And obviously, you're going through the process right now, but I would very highly recommend that we try to fit in there as well. They already have the technology. They already have all like the staffing. Ultimately, what you want is an app system that people can put their stuff in and then you get the tickets. So I would encourage CTA especially in light of like budget situations and everything, to try to piggyback off of the amazing app that already exists, Shy 311. Right now, if you open the app, you see transportation in there, but nothing CTA specific. So like ideally, like you would have your own like CTA tab, and then, right, let them, do all of the technology and the backbone and the infrastructure. Ultimately, what we would want is just the tickets, right? And then we would also want to be able to say it's completed so that people can look at their own, right? Because you can, using the app, you can look at my ticket requests, right? And it's okay, put it on this day and it was completed on this day. And so if you haven't seen it, I recommend that you all use it. Anything that graffiti removal, tree trimming, lights out, anything, it's a great app, and the city does a great job responding to. It's like you being your own 311 operator.
I had one other point that I want to kind of share with the group. I don't know quite yet how to move forward with it, but you mentioned something earlier that was a more positive spin on how I was viewing the situation when you were talking about, private busing for CPS schools, and maybe you explore an IGA where, CPS is, sending some funding or however it would work. I don't know how it would work to provide the busing for the students. Kind of going back to the point, I've heard it, especially during the pandemic. I don't hear it as much these days, but I think it generally still holds true that a lot of the ills that CTA is dealing with are kind of societal ills, right? I'm thinking, unhoused populations, in particular. It's a shelter issue. It's a housing issue. It's a social services issue. And for things like that, which are also, there's security, there's perceived safety, real safety to often those populations, they're vulnerable themselves. To what degree we are using as an agency, IGAs to kind of either bolster response, or if there is a response to kind of take some of that burden, operational or financial, off of CTA and towards the social service agencies or departments that can, I guess that is their mission, to work with those populations. So it's not necessarily, I still consider it a safety issue, but it's not so much what are we going to do with this population, but it's how do we most effectively keep our resources clear for other service concerns.
As I recall in the conversation, I have to give you 3 seconds of background. I was chairman of the largest homeless shelter in the city of Chicago for many years. But there is a CTA unit that does nothing but reach out to the homeless population that are using public transportation to get them services that they need to have. One of the largest single hassles is you can't force somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, actually, we contract with the night ministry and with Haymarket
Actually, the
through
intergovernmental.
the Department of Family and Support.
Thank you. That's what I was, yeah, okay.
Cracked out with the
Hey.
organizations. There's a $2 million IGA. If the recommendation is to perhaps explore ways to expand that, which I know CTA would be very interested in doing. But if there are some recommendations for perhaps organizations, that we should consider, I think that would be fair to have the recommendation.
Is CTA working with the new trauma response team at CDPH? They have a whole new division of like street trauma workers. Do we have an IGA with them as well?
We do have an IGA with CDPH. I believe it was with respect to overdoses on CTA. We also set up a couple of machines with Narcan, but also other like personal medical needs that might be needed on as people are taking the system. I don't know the entire scope of that CPH agreement, so that may be also something to there as well for staff to explore whether we're in that partnership, and if not, considering expanding our relationship.
Yeah, they have a
And you
whole
would
team.
want it to be expanded to what end as it relates to safety?
So they have a whole team now that's been stood up, I think, over the last like 6 months to a year. So it's pretty new. And what they are is they're supposed to go out and deal with people with power having mental health disturbances. And so I would think like a lot of times when you're dealing with unhoused population, it's like a lot of mental health as well. So as far as like having professional, I guess like social workers who are trained to deal with, having so that CTA staff has that resource. Like if we're dealing with a person, I'm a maintenance person, I'm a bus driver, but I don't have that skill set that they have that number on hand because they have, it's like 40, 60. And right now they just work during the day. So like they're generally kind of looking for things too right now. And so I would pretty sure we could probably use some of that people power.
I'm sure we could. That's a great suggestion. These are gonna be some very robust minutes, lots of suggestions.
I'm tapped out.
Yeah.
I just have a quick question. Is there smoke alarms on the train carts?
So that-
Smoke alarms on the train carts now?
The normal thing is if you see smoking, you tap that button or PIU. And the operator will get it in, they say, but as far as no,
No smoke alarms.
it's just cameras in the PIU unit.
No, I actually dealt with this on the way here. There was somebody smoking in my, I was on the Green Line and there was somebody smoking in the car and, because the person was like in the car, like I just didn't feel comfortable pushing the button and
Yeah,
speaking.
nobody does.
Yeah, nobody does. So I used the chat bot and I didn't notice them do anything.
I will, all, anecdotal, but I'll say I'm a believer in the chatbot. I have chatbot snitched on smokers several times and they have intervened. They have intervened within 2 stops, more often than not. I would say the hit rate is probably about 70%. Someone has come into the car. Now, do they always catch them is the thing. Sometimes they come in and the person will have like gotten out of the car, the stop before, or they like move between the cars. But I've seen a response through the chatbot. I was actually gonna give it kudos. I have it bookmarked like you.
Yeah, no. I haven't, yeah, I personally haven't seen anything, but
Yeah,
And I think we should rely on the data for the chatbot to come.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And I encourage you to look at, as we did a couple of board meetings ago, the innovation team reported on the chatbot. So there is data, and
Great.
there is regular reporting. It's fairly new. There will expand its function. We understand it's basic and major at this point. But stay tuned, and this is what these recommendations are for. So if you'd like the board to consider exploring more data and encouraging staff to, get more functions on the chatbot, which I know they are doing, but to amplify that ask is this moment. Thanks.
I think all of the bullet points kind of became encompassed into a larger productive conversation. Sorry, I think we can move on to new business. Great.
Oh, I'm sorry, I would be doing a lot of my friends a disservice if I didn't bring this up. But so we all agree, more ridership, more safety, simple as. And so I would ask for the Chicago's business community, if they're thinking about safety and security on our transit, that they join the coalition to end parking minimums as set forth in Mayor Johnson's Cut the Tape initiative. It would boost our housing supply around transit centers, lead to a lot more housing, which lowers housing prices and also leads to less homeless people. I see it as an extremely intersectional piece of policy that everyone, and especially agencies, should be putting serious political capital into.
So I can respond to that directly. So just one thing about our particular is that we don't do housing. We don't have a residential component. That said, we are part of the red tape, cut the red tape initiative, and we co-sign it both as members of Civic Federation and as an organization, all of the initiatives.
Yeah, all hundred something.
Yeah. That's all the, yeah.
A lot of those have been passed.
Yeah. And there's even another small business coalition that's pushing a little further on some of them, and we are official co-signs on that as well. So yes, is your answer.
Can you just repeat the ask? You said it's to reduce the amount of.
Abolish parking minimums.
Okay.
So that for every new housing development, they're not required for a family of four to have,
Yeah. We are.
I agree with you.
We are on that. We just don't, obviously, we're not as subject to them personally. But yes, we are not signatory, wrong word. That's a labor word. We have signed on to that as well, and active participants. Secretary Greenlee, is there any new business?
There is no new business. I will note under new business, even though it's not actually under new business, that our vote for our February meeting has come in with 4 for the 14th of February and 4 for the 12th of February. I'm sorry, for the 21st. With the preferred time being, for both dates being 11:00 a.m. I think for our office, probably the 21st works better. Just because the 14th is already a very busy week here. A lot of other reasons. And obviously also with 8 people voting, 2 people did not, so maybe there may be a tiebreaker that comes in, but it's leaning heavily in the direction of the 21st.
Can I change my vote actually to the 14th?
You can, I don't know if it's gonna make a difference, but
Yeah, okay. It doesn't make a difference.
you can, but I think the train's left the station, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. We don't need a motion for.
Adjournment, yes.
No, not for the new.
No.
Okay, all right, thank you. May I have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
It's been moved by Robert Castaneda, seconded by Peter Henderson, that the meeting be adjourned. We'll take a roll call vote. Robert Castaneda.
Aye.
Sonia Del Rio.
Aye.
Peter Henderson.
Aye.
Rob Johnson.
Aye.
Brian McCray.
Aye.
Caroline Pavlicek.
Aye.
Tracy Powell. Vanderwill. The motion passes.
We are adjourned.